Have you ever wondered if everyone sees the world exactly like you do? Take something as simple as the colour of your favourite shirt. You look at it and instantly know exactly what colour you're seeing. Someone next to you would probably name that colour exactly the same. You both call it red and never even question it.
Before we start, hit like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Now, let me show you something strange.
Here's the strange part. How do you know we see the same red? I can show you the colour, but I can't show you what I experience. And that's where this simple question gets surprisingly complicated.
Our answers might match perfectly every single time, but matching answers don't necessarily mean matching experiences, because the colour you experience isn't actually inside the object. The object only reflects certain kinds of light toward your eyes. That light comes in different wavelengths, and none of those wavelengths carries a tiny label saying red. So where does the red you experience actually come from? The answer begins inside your own eyes. Special cells in your retina respond when light enters your eyes. Your retina contains three main types of cells called cones. Each type of cone responds differently to incoming light. Different wavelengths activate these cones in different amounts. Your eyes don't send colours directly to your brain. They send simple signals about how those cones responded. Your brain receives these signals and combines them. And that's where your experience of colour begins. Your brain turns those three simple signals into something you actually experience as colour. This is why the same light can produce a completely different visual experience. And there's an amazing example of this hiding inside every screen. Look closely at your phone, television, or computer screen. You will find tiny red, green, and blue pixels working together. Each pixel uses these three basic colours in different amounts. Your screen isn't physically producing every colour you see. Your brain combines those signals and creates the colours for you. Those three signals can combine in many different ways. Different combinations create the enormous range of colours you experience. Your brain doesn't simply receive a finished colour from the screen. It interprets the signals coming from those tiny pixels. That's why three basic pixel colours can create millions of visual colours. The screen only controls how strongly each pixel colour shines. Your brain does the rest of the work. And that creates a much bigger problem. If your brain creates the colour, where does the experience actually exist? It exists inside your brain, not inside the object you are looking at. And that experience is completely private to you. You can describe it, but nobody can directly see it. Another person can describe their own experience just as confidently. Their words might match yours perfectly, but neither of you can open the other's mind and compare them. And that's where the real mystery begins. Imagine two people looking at exactly the same red object. Both of them call it red without hesitation. Both learned the same word for that colour while growing up. Their answers match, so everything seems perfectly normal. But what if their internal experiences were actually different? Imagine one person's red feeling like another person's green. They would still call the same object red, and neither person would have any way to discover the difference.
If everyone learned the same colour names, their answers could always match. They could point to the same objects and use exactly the same words. They could even agree on which colours look similar or different. From the outside, everything would appear completely normal. We can compare their words, actions, and physical responses. We can even measure signals produced by their visual systems, but none of those measurements directly reveal what the colour feels like.
We can measure the exact wavelengths of light entering an eye. We can measure how strongly different cone cells respond. We can track the signals travelling through the visual system. We can even study activity inside the visual areas of the brain. All of these measurements tell us something about the process, but they still don't show us the actual experience of seeing red. The physical signals can be compared between people. Their private experiences cannot be directly placed side by side. But none of those measurements directly reveals what the colour feels like.
Human colour vision can actually differ from person to person. One important example is colour blindness.
In some people, certain cone cells work differently or are missing. This can make particular colours much harder to distinguish. Two colours that seem clearly different to you may look much more similar to them. So we already know that human colour perception isn't identical for everyone. But this still doesn't prove that everyone else experiences ordinary colours differently. And that's where the science becomes even more interesting. Some people may have a fourth type of cone cell. This condition is known as potential tetrachromacy. A fourth cone could respond to wavelengths that three cones handle together. That could allow someone to distinguish certain colour differences more precisely. Their visual system would therefore receive information that most people don't get. But having different colour receptors doesn't automatically mean their colours look completely different. It simply shows that human colour vision can be biologically different. And that brings us back to the question we started with. We can detect these biological differences with scientific measurements. We can compare how different eyes respond to the same light. We can compare the signals travelling from those eyes to the brain. We can study how the visual system processes those signals. So science can compare a lot of what happens before perception. But there is still one thing we cannot directly compare. That is the actual subjective feeling produced inside someone's mind. We can measure the process, but not the experience itself.
You can point at an apple and call its colour red. Another person can recognise that same colour and use the same word. Same colour name can be taught and repeated for years. Everyone can learn to connect that word with the same objects. So people can communicate perfectly about colours without sharing sensations. We can compare the things they say and do. But their private experience remains hidden inside each person's mind. And that's why matching language cannot prove matching perception.
We can pass the same colour information from one person to another. The information can travel through words without changing. Another person can receive that information and understand exactly what you mean. But the word only tells them what to call the colour. It doesn't transfer the private feeling that comes with seeing it. That feeling exists inside an individual mind. We can communicate about an experience without directly sharing it. And that is the limit we cannot currently cross.
We can communicate the name of a colour through a simple word. That word can travel from one person to another. We can also measure the physical light producing that colour. We can measure how the eye responds to that light. We can measure the signals travelling through the visual system. We can compare those measurable signals between different people, but the measurements still cannot reveal the private feeling itself. So the experience inside each mind remains impossible to compare directly.
Some people have three cone types that respond differently to light. In colour blindness, one or more of these systems can work differently. That can make certain colours harder to distinguish. So we already know that human colour vision can vary biologically. But some people may have four types of cones instead of three. This possibility is called tetrachromacy. A fourth cone could help distinguish additional differences between colours. These differences show that human visual systems are not perfectly identical. Most human eyes share the same basic system for detecting colour. The same light usually produces similar responses in these visual systems. Those similar responses then create similar signals for the brain. The brain processes these signals through a broadly similar visual system, so there is strong reason to expect similar colour perception. Most people can distinguish the same basic colours around them. They can also recognise the same differences between many shades. That makes it very likely that we experience colours in broadly similar ways.
Most human eyes are built from the same basic colour detecting system. The same light therefore tends to create similar signals in different people. That helps explain why we usually experience the same colourful world. So the simplest answer is that we probably see colours very similarly. But similar does not mean our private experiences are perfectly identical. Science can measure the signals, but not the feeling itself. So your red is probably like mine, but we cannot prove it's identical. And that's the one part of colour we may never be able to compare.